Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of the FV009 podcast. I'm your host, Sunny Burns.
And I'm your co-host, Sunmarie Burns.
This past weekend, we celebrated our 6-year wedding anniversary. And because of that, we felt it would be appropriate to talk about marriages.
6 years definitely does not make us experts in marriage, but we have learned a few things along the way. So in today's episode, we wanted to touch on 3 guiding principles to help create a thriving marriage. These are 3 principles that we live by and we find have been extremely helpful in building a strong relationship ourselves. And we also want to discuss a couple of factors to consider when you're preparing for marriage to help you make the right choices so that you can find a marriage that will last and bring happiness.
Before we get too far into it, we do want to share a couple quick updates about the podcast, things that we're excited about and things that you listeners have helped us to get to. So first thing, we hit a huge milestone. We hit 1,000 listeners this past week. So we're really excited about that and just want to say thank you to everyone who's listening and all the comments we've been receiving. And another huge milestone we just hit was we made it to the new and noteworthy section of iTunes for our category. And that's pretty spectacular because that was one of our biggest goals in starting this podcast.
Very exciting to see that. Very exciting.
Yeah, so thank you so much. And kind of to celebrate that, we created a new messaging system, new voicemail that you can call us and leave us your feedback or a question that we can air later on the show. And the number to call is 862-200-7484. And again, you can just call that number, leave us a message, a question, or just a comment. And yeah, we'd be happy to listen. We'd be happy to always get your feedback. Again, that number is 862-200-7484.
If you have suggestions of topics you'd like to hear on future shows, that's a great way to get that information to us as well, because we'd love to hear what you're interested in hearing and then speak to that.
Right. So without further ado, let's get to the show.
You're listening to the FV009 podcast. If you're looking to raise your family with intention, gain financial independence, and live a life of true freedom, you're in the right place. Join us as we explore together how to create thriving families, because strong families are the cornerstone for a world at peace.
So we thought a great place to start with our marriage story was, our background. So we got to know each other about 10 years ago now, doing youth ministry together, both volunteering as staff members for our local youth ministry. And, I think it was the summer of 2010, right around my birthday, where we decided to come into kind of a committed relationship, a courtship. And after 6 months of, writing letters to each other, talking here and there, calling each other, I decided it was about time to propose to this girl. So on January 22nd, after our 6-month official anniversary, I proposed to Sunmarie. The night before, so this is, 8.5 years ago now, I proposed. But the night before, I took Sunmarie's parents out to dinner to ask their permission if I can marry Sunmarie. And upon their consent, I had made a plan previously with a jeweler I had known, my friend's dad, to make a special ring. Sunmarie loved sunflowers, so I made it out of, in the design of a sunflower that I drew up in CAD as an engineer and had him craft. And for one reason or another, we were doing it last minute, even though I had approached this to him months in advance.
It's a sunflower.
There's the ring if you're viewing, with a chocolate diamond in the center. Gold petals with a silver band. And he forged this thing out of a band of metal. So it wasn't like a cast ring. It was that night forging it with a hammer and melting. And oh man, it was wild. I was a bit scared not knowing how the end product was going to be, but it was spectacular.
He said he was having fun with you. He wanted to bring a little drama in there by not having it prepared for you when you came to pick it up.
Right, and I was over there like at 2 a.m. the night before the proposal was supposed to happen. And anyway, what's the rest of the story, Sunmarie?
Yeah, so I was pretty oblivious to all of this. I had known that he had taken my parents out to dinner, and they came and they were just raving about how great the steak dinner was that he brought them. And when I asked him later how the dinner went, he told me he doesn't even recall what it tasted like because he was so nervous. But yeah, so the next day was Saturday, and he came over to visit me, and he made me breakfast in bed, which was really sweet. I got to sleep in that day, which is one of my favorite things to do.
Still is.
More than ever. And then we had a wonderful day together. He had all these activities planned out for us to do for the entire day. And I didn't know he was going to propose to me that day. I really didn't know that. I just thought, we were hanging out as we often did. And just another great date out together. So the first thing he did was take me to a museum, which is one of my favorite things to do, and one of my favorite places to go to is this particular museum.
Newark Museum.
The Newark Museum, where I took many art classes as a child. So we went there, we enjoyed some art, which is definitely not like you to go to art museums. But I was super happy you wanted to do that together. And then we went to a motorcycle store because that was like you. And I went willingly because I loved you. We looked at motorcycles.
I had a motorcycle at the time that Hurricane Sandy killed.
Yes.
And then somebody didn't advise I renew and get another one.
Yes.
So I've been motorcycle-less.
Sandy answered my prayers. I was like, boy, how am I going to gently ask him to get rid of the motorcycle without being the meanie here? And then the hurricane flood wiped it out. I'm like, yeah, very nice. So anyway, we enjoyed that morning, and then we had planned to go hiking together. So we went to this great bakery in Fort Lee, which actually has the same name as my name.
It's called Sun Mary.
The Sun Marie Bakery.
Right. And that was actually one of our almost ways we got to know each other was through that bakery. So had some hidden memories in there.
Right. And we bought a whole bunch of great pastries and snacks and took them out into the woods and went for a hike. And this was January. So there was snow on the ground. It was quite cold. But we didn't care. We were going to go hiking anyway through the snow and the ice. So we hiked and then came to this one spot where apparently Sunny had been laboring for several hours the day before attempting to build an igloo. And the end result was a half igloo. Didn't quite get the roof done.
Yeah.
But I was super moved. I was like, that's so cute. You were out here building me an igloo so that we could build a campfire and watch the sunset. How sweet. So it was very, very sweet.
The whole idea was hopefully to have a full igloo, but also to have ice skates because there was a pond up there, but it wasn't cold enough for the pond to be frozen enough for us to skate around. But still, we enjoyed the picnic, pastries with the fire, and I think overall pretty romantic.
Yeah, it was really nice. We watched the sunset, we watched the moon come out, and then we decided to hike back home in the dark in the woods. But it was really, really sweet. And we got back to his house, and it was like 8 p.m. at that point. And I'm thinking, all right, maybe dinner sometime soon. But no dinner. We sat and we drank Snapple, I remember, and watched the movie A Walk to Remember. Very romantic movie. And actually, it was significant to us because we both just finished reading the book together. Yeah. We'd read it and shared about it. It was like our own little mini book club. Yeah. And so then we decided to watch the movie together, which was...
Why Snapple? There was something significant about it. I forget why I chose Snapple. Anyway,
I don't remember.
Let's move on.
Anyway, but I do remember it was Snapple.
I do remember that too.
Maybe I told you it was one of my favorite drinks.
That's probably what it was.
I did like Snapple.
Okay.
So we watched the movie, and when the movie ended, it was around 10 p.m. I'm like, I'm really starving. No sign of dinner. I guess he's just not hungry. Oh, well, it's 10 p.m. I guess it's time to say goodnight. And he's like, no, we got to go to dinner. And I was like, wow, dinner, 10 p.m. Okay. All right. I guess we're eating late tonight. So he didn't tell me where we were going. And we got in the car and we were driving. And he just started like driving circles around this supermarket parking lot. And I'm like, what is this guy up to? Where are we going? And then he said, you know what, I got to take a call. And he parked the car in the parking lot and got out of the car and talked to somebody on the phone for a while. And I was like, all right. And then comes back. It's like, okay, let's go. And so we get out of the car and we walk across the street to this little Japanese sushi restaurant in Ridgewood, New Jersey. Sakurubana.
Yes, I used to be a dishwasher there.
Yeah. And it was about 10:30 at that point. We get inside and immediately I sensed something was up because there was nobody else in the restaurant and I heard music playing. And it happened to be Marry Me by Train.
And Train was one of your favorite bands at that point.
It was. And I loved that song. And you took my hand, you led me into the restaurant, and to my surprise, the entire restaurant had been rearranged with just one table in the middle of the entire restaurant with a candle on it, and 100 sunflowers just displayed all around the entire restaurant. Sunflowers are my favorite flower. And I was like, wow, this is not your typical restaurant. This is something special. And at that point, you asked me to dance to the song Marry Me. And there was no one in sight, just him and me and a candle on the table and the song Marry Me. And we just began to slow dance around the restaurant. And then you asked me a bunch of questions. And then you asked me if I would like to spend the rest of my life together with you.
And then I got down on one knee and proposed. And you said yes.
I did. It was a magical moment. I remember it vividly. Very romantic. I'm super impressed with what a romantic plan you came up with.
Yes, I thought it was pretty good myself.
It was.
And then we had, as our waiter, since the restaurant was closed at this point, pretty much. It was closed. My best friend was a waiter, and he came out in his tux and served us dinner, which was a bit awkward. He was awkward. But
the dinner was good.
Right.
Filet mignon.
Yes.
Green tea ice cream. Very good. The owner was very generous to open the doors for us after hours for this special event.
Yeah.
So it was a very wonderful memory, and that is our proposal story.
Right. And so we wanted to start out with something kind of light and warm and kind of, everyone's kind of, when you think of marriage, or perhaps when you're younger and you're thinking of marriage, you think of these kind of flowery stories or these romantic escapades or fun times. And it's fun to dwell on for sure. But, marriage is not all roses and sunshine and
sunflowers.
There's a lot of work and commitment and growth and challenges, roller coaster rides, emotions up and down, and we've definitely experienced our fair share of that. But I think
my saying yes was not the end of happily ever after. It was
right.
the beginning of a new journey of a marriage and all the amazing growth and challenges that come with it.
Right.
So over the 6 years of our marriage, we've experienced a lot of ups and downs, a lot of happiness and sadness. We've also seen a lot of relationships come and go, and it got us to thinking quite deeply on the topic of what makes a lasting marriage. What is it that can outlast the ebbs and flows of life, that can make a marriage carry through? And the way we like to define it is that a lasting marriage is a continuous commitment to growth with a heart of humility. And a lot of people would define the root of marriage as being love. But that is where a lot of people get mistaken or confused. Love, while being sweet and a very important aspect of marriage or any relationship, is an emotion and a feeling. And emotions are by nature temporary states. Emotions of any kind start up and fade out continuously throughout our lives as a knee-jerk response to life factors and events that happen around us. Emotions or feelings of any kind are temporary and fleeting. If you base your marriage on a feeling of love, the idea of giving love or feeling love in return, you will be in for a roller coaster ride of inconsistency and uncertainty. In order for a marriage to outlast the ebbs and flows of our fickle and ever-changing state of emotions, it must be rooted in something so much more deep, something more stable and unchanging. Commitment is a key aspect of marriage. Commitment is the pact you make within yourself and to others to see something through to completion, regardless of how you're feeling about it on that given day. Growth is also an important aspect of marriage, almost equally so. Growth is the ever-continuous process of developing or maturing and perfecting oneself, never allowing oneself to become stuck in your ways or complacent with mediocrity. When you commit to growth, you're committing to the promise that regardless of anything life throws at you, you will proactively work on growing your heart, maturing your ability to love as God loves, and strive to perfect the aspects of yourself that you have direct dominion over. A heart of humility, which is the last aspect of our definition, will allow you to give grace and forgiveness to yourself and your partner as you work on growing. Because like anything that must be learned, you will make some mistakes along the way, and it will be your partner's grace that will motivate you to pick yourself back up and try again until you get it right. When this is at the root of your marriage, you will have a much firmer foundation to stand upon when facing the ever-changing waves of the ocean of life. So that is our definition of a lasting marriage defined.
Very well said, Sunmarie. Very well said. And yes, that's a little hardcore, intense, but you really need that super strong, not changing commitment if you want to make a marriage last. Right. And, that commitment not to just, oh yeah, I'm in this forever, but the commitment to also grow and make it a thriving marriage. It's not just, sure, that commitment needs to be there, but you also need to be proactive and intentional about making it something great.
Like anything in life that you pursue, you wouldn't choose a career path and say, I want this, and then never work on learning about it and investing in an education towards developing it and becoming as knowledgeable as you can be on how to succeed. You just wouldn't do that. And yet somehow marriage seems to be an anomaly in a lot of people's minds. That's just supposed to be this thing that effortlessly happens, and as long as we make each other happy, we must be right for each other. But as soon as things get rough, we must not be right for each other anymore, and it's time to look elsewhere.
Right.
And so I feel like, especially in our society today, we're getting a lot of that message of romantic love, the infatuation of just being in this in-love state. And as long as I feel happy and intoxicated in the presence of my partner, then I know it must be right. But the reality of life doesn't usually play out like that. Maybe a little bit, for sure. You go through ebbs and flows of that.
Right.
But it has to be so much deeper. Otherwise, it just can't carry you.
Right. They say the infatuation phase really only lasts 2, 3, 4 years maybe. And then it's gone. And, once that's gone, what foundation have you built in the meantime? And, what kind of commitment, what kind of,
have you been real in assessing your relationship and bringing it to a place where, you have true intimacy and true knowledge of your partner, and you're willing to work on yourselves to be the best possible versions for yourself and for each other.
Right. So I think that's a good place to kind of move now into some of those guiding principles we alluded to earlier. And so we have three core principles that we kind of really take to heart and practice in our daily lives. And I feel, we were taught this kind of early in our marriage, and it's been so critical for us to kind of create a thriving marriage. And so those three principles, the first one is, act to the greatest common denominator of the two of you. And what that means is kind of just, look to the higher purposed individual of the moment. And that just means, you know how you hear a lot of times, work towards the least common denominator. So if you're in a class of 30, you're working at teaching at the pace of the the slowest child who's learning. So in this way, it's almost the opposite, where in a couple, you work towards the level of the highest minded person in the couple or the relationship. And I think if you can do that, you have set yourself up for so much success. Like, for instance, an example would be maybe one couple wants to just sit home and watch TV, while another couple wants to go volunteer at a school event. So something more public-minded, something more helpful. Then if you were to practice this principle, the couple who just want to watch TV would be like, okay, honey, I want to side with you. You are thinking higher purpose, higher minded. Let's do the activity you wanted to do and be on board. And if you can both agree to that as a couple, I think so much conflict can be resolved.
Right. And, you're never going to always want to be doing the same thing at the same time all the time.
Right.
And so a way of deciding which one will trump the other makes it pretty simple. If this is your unspoken rule, whoever has a higher purpose, that's the one we're going to side with in that moment. Even if it's not what I really feel like doing right now, it's pushing me to become a better person in the long run. So that's something we have abided by in our life, and I think it's definitely helped a lot to challenge ourselves and grow ourselves and live our best possible versions.
And it's kind of easy to say. It's not always, easy in practice. I think it's a good principle. We try to follow as much as possible. But, some things we're just a lot more passionate about ourselves than our spouses. Like, for instance, I love running and working out, and Sunmarie not so much. So, hey, let's wake up at 6 a.m. to go for a run before the kids are awake or something like that. And you don't necessarily be on board. So you do have to make accommodations here and there, make it realistic for your spouse. Right. But in general, when it comes to most life decisions or random events that pop up, we abide by this guiding principle. And in this way, we make each other better by working, meeting each other's strengths and growing ourselves to that highest potential of your partner and growing yourself into that.
Also, a factor to consider in that is how much does it mean to the person that you're with. So this may be the greater cause, but are we both passionate about it? Maybe not so much. So maybe sometimes we'll relax a bit on things, but on things that really matter, where one partner is particularly passionate about it and it is the higher purposed option, it's always good to consider going along with that option.
Right. Like whenever Sunmarie suggests maybe doing a devotional reading in the morning or something like that, I'll maybe I'm not into it, but I'll be like, okay, that's definitely the better objective to complete. So let me go along with this. So guiding principle number 2, be on the same team. And basically, this is a very simple one, but so critical. So many times, we focus as a partner in the couple, we focus our anger and frustration on each other when we really should be focusing it on the problem. And, this is so transformative. If instead of, getting angry with each other because something didn't go right, some event happened, some catalyst, some cause happened, and you get mad at each other because of the frustration builds, something didn't go right. If instead you can team together, be on the same team against the problem, that habit of doing that will be so critical to prevent arguments. For example, just last week, over the weekend when we were in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, we got a parking ticket. And, it was a $20 fine, and it could have been so easy. I had parked, and I had set a timer on my phone, but for some reason we were in a convention. It was hard to keep track of the time, and so I ended up getting a ticket in my car. And somebody could have been mad at me and be like, hey, how'd you get a ticket? We're spending all this money on tickets. And actually, we just got another ticket a week earlier. We're doing bad with these tickets, but at home, just
3
street
days
cleaning, we got another ticket, and at the same thing, I could have been mad at Sunmarie. How could you get another ticket? We're throwing money out the window. Don't you know we've lived here 3 years? Blah, 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 blah. Could have gone on and on. Blame game, blame game, blame game.
Right.
But instead, we're on the same team, and I think we talked about it and putting like a calendar event, about street cleaning and just proactive ways that we could transform and change and grow rather than blaming and getting on each other, working as a team to solve these issues.
Right.
And constantly throughout our lives, that's come up. And I think because we practice this principle, we don't argue almost ever. Like, I don't
We
remember
get
the last time we
frustrated
argued.
at situations, and then we proactively troubleshoot to figure out how to prevent them from happening again and what we can do better going forward.
Right.
But we don't waste any time looking to blame
Each
or
other.
shoulda, coulda, woulda. There's
Right.
just no sense in Monday night
Right.
footballing on a lot of these things. They've happened. It's in the past now, and you just gotta learn from it and move on.
Right. The event happens. We think about it. We are maybe sad about it, but we know we need to move on and find the best proactive way to make sure to mitigate it in the future.
Right.
And especially, I think, once you're a parent and you're raising kids, and your lack of sleep, kids are challenging. There's challenges coming each and every day. If you can't be on the same team, instead of bringing you together as a family, those kids can be a dividing wedge point
Right.
for
Can
you.
make things very tense very
Right.
quickly.
But so when you're a parent, you definitely have to be on the same side, same team, supporting each other. I feel like sometimes it's us against the kids, but honestly, that's okay. I think if we're a team,
Yeah.
a unit, saying, sending a united message to our children, no, you can't do this, you got to do this, or just working together. And I think that is actually more important to the child, to see than anything else. To see a united husband and wife, parents uniting
Right.
together.
It's relationship building, this habit of working together as a team. You're not tearing each other down. You're not creating scars that are going to come back in the relationship later that have caused injury and pain and resentment. And I feel like that's been huge for us. There's lots of times that we're disappointed in how things went with the children out in public or wherever we go. And, it's very easy to blame yourself or to
You
blame
didn't
your
raise them
spouse.
right.
Yeah, and just like look at the situation. Gee, I wish it was better, this or that. But we just take the time to look at it objectively, step back,
And console each other, and take it as a team. Like, how can we...
and counsel
Do
each
better.
other through it the best that we know how. What would you do? What do you think we can do to change this so it doesn't happen again? And then you really feel like you are working as a team and growing together and deepening these bonds of trust and understanding.
Again, it's so simple. It sounds so simple, but it really is so hard to put that into practice. But once you can make it a habit, it's really a beautiful thing. And again, that's, focusing your anger and frustration on the problem and not the person. And that goes to like all relationships, but especially in marriage, it is key. So, principle number 3. You want to take this one, Sunmarie?
Sure. So our principle number 3 is to never take each other for granted. And what that means is to just not get stuck in a rut in your relationship where you feel like, I know my partner, they know me, we're never going to change. We are who we are, and we just got to accept the status quo. The idea that you need to continuously grow in your relationship, continuously work on growing your love for your partner. As you change through experiences in life, you need to, and your partner changes, you need to be able to change with them, move along with them, and to constantly reassess your relationship. Do weekly relationship check-ins where you ask, how are we doing? How is our love life? How is our feeling of being fulfilled in this relationship? What could I do better as your spouse? And just really stopping to think how you can grow and improve constantly and consistently throughout life. I think as soon as people start to just sort of live through each day and take each other for granted, not really take the time to recognize what it is about their partner that they loved in the first place, and just put that on the back burner, that's where very quickly distractions can come in, or lack of interest, and just a lot of troubles can arise if you're not constantly checking the pulse of your relationship and keeping it healthy through growing together and developing together and taking care of one another.
Right. And you also don't take each other granted if you're continually trying to develop your skills. And, we made it a commitment from pretty much the first year of our relationship we loved the book, The Five Love Languages. So we decided every year we're going to make it a tradition to read the book. And so every year for the past 9-10 years now, we've read the Five Love Languages. Last year we took a little bit of a detour and read the Five Love Languages for children, but pretty much every single year we've read that, and that was just a commitment we've taken towards growth, towards never taking each other for granted. And it just kind of refreshes us, reminds us the lessons that are in the book, but also just the relationship that we kind of want to keep as priority number one above all else. Because we really feel like if your marriage is successful, if it is thriving, everything else kind of falls into place. Or even if it doesn't.
You can weather any storm if you feel your relationship is secure. And also, once you have kids, your kids can truly have the freedom to thrive and become themselves, knowing that their parents are secure in their love.
Yeah. We really believe that, the most important thing you can do for your children is to have that healthy, successful marriage.
Yeah.
So we wanted to dig a little bit further into the Five Love Languages, since it is indeed our favorite marriage resource.
It's the book Five Love Languages by Dr. Gary Chapman. And in his book, he lays out the premise that there are 5 core love languages that people live by. And not everyone feels love in the same way. So a lot of times there's frustrations in relationships where partners feel like, I'm showering my partner with so much love. I do so much for them. And the partner says, I feel nothing because we never spend time together. And that's a classic example of 2 differing love languages where both spouse is expressing love, but not in the language that their partner can truly receive and feel loved by. So the 5 languages that he proposes are words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch. And he goes into all 5 of these and how there are expressions of those types of love.
Right. So you were mentioning like frustration, like this husband showering his spouse with gifts or money or something like that, but maybe she's not love languages of receiving gifts, and maybe instead she wants that quality time love language, which he's not giving, and that's why she's not feeling loved, he's not feeling loved in reciprocation.
Right. And it causes a lot of frustration, and we found this very enlightening. There's a test you can take, a quiz you can take to figure out what your love language is. Sometimes you have more than one. You have one that's your key primary one, and then you have a secondary one. So those are 2 forms of love that you feel the most loved by. For me, I was words of affirmation and quality time.
And that's changed throughout the years.
It does change.
Different things.
Yeah.
Like for me now, I'm mostly acts of service. And that's changed dramatically from what it used to be. So it definitely changed throughout the years. But once you know it, and just take the quiz at 5lovelanguages.com/quizzes, and you get your free quiz and find out, you and your spouse should take it. And then you can focus your energies in speaking the love language that speaks loudest to your spouse, and really,
That way your efforts in showing love to them are being received in the way they're best able to understand it.
Right. And we found it to be so true and so transformative, and something that everyone should really know.
And it's great to just check your pulse every year or every couple of years, because as you mentioned, it does change throughout the years when you're in a different place in your relationship. Acts of service is great at some point, but at another point you like flowery words and words of affirmation. You just like chilling out together and having quality time together. It changes throughout stages of life.
Right.
So that's why we love to revisit it all the time. It never gets old, and it always has something relevant to where we're at.
Right. So spend 10 minutes, hop on the website, take the quiz, and it's like about 30 questions. Just answer those. Another great topic that they go into in the 5 love languages that we really love is the idea of a love tank. And he gives this example. It's like you have a fish tank, and when it's empty, it's so you feel every little aggravation that happens when your love tank is empty. anything that happens, it could completely derail you. But when your love tank is full, you had all these, maybe your words of affirmation guy, and your wife tells you all these great things, and your love tank is full. Something happens, a little hiccup, you just weather it. It's no problem. And we feel like that's so true. When we are in a good place in our marriage, we can really go through anything together. And so it's always, what he suggests is always try to make sure your love tank is full. And
if a spouse is expressing an unusual amount of frustration at a point in your marriage, it might be an indicator that their love tank is running on empty, and
any little thing is going to set them off.
Right. And you need to, step back and think, I need to express more love to my partner here. They are craving it right now. So it's a good check-in. Another great marriage resource that we've tried and really enjoyed was the Marriage Course by Nikki and Scylla Lee. It's actually a combination video course with workbook, and oftentimes you can go to classes and take the course, or you can just download it yourself and do it at home at your leisure. But that was a really great course where it spanned, I think, 8 sessions, and in each session it covers a different relationship topic, such as resolving conflict, creating more effective communication,
differences between man and a woman and their growing up backgrounds,
family considerations, and all sorts of factors that you encounter in a relationship. And it's really a great resource because it shows you, A, I'm not the only one going through this, and B, there are great tools and resources to help you better your communication skills, your ability to get through a tense situation, your understanding of each other's families, and so forth. So that was a great course that we took. We really appreciated it and recommend it.
Yeah, and we've gone on couples retreats before, and I think it's been called Energize, where really the focus is on your couple for a weekend. And we've been lucky enough to have our grandparents or our parents watch the children, and we can kind of get a getaway and a refresher to really just focus in on where we're at in our marriage and what we kind of need. And they also give you guidance and tools and tips throughout the weekend to kind of facilitate talking with your spouse, make new goals, new ideals. And we found that to be very valuable and powerful.
Especially once you have kids and family, life can get so fast-paced. You're not thinking about your relationship all the time. So we like to do those every couple of years. Maybe we'll go to a retreat just to take some space for our relationship.
Right. And that's when we started kind of doing date nights and things like that from hearing about that in the Energize retreat.
Yeah.
Another book we really recommend is Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts. So that was a good read that we read early on in our marriage, or when we were engaged.
It's great for when you are starting to think about looking towards marriage and a lasting relationship. It gives a lot of helpful tips on what you should be focusing on. But it's also great once you're in a relationship to just get the right perspective on how you should feel about things. It talks about gender differences, like the way a man views things versus the way a woman views things, and common misunderstandings that could come up, and just helping you understand each other better. And
it's all important, because as you read these books and you're going through your relationship and you see, like, you find out, oh, okay, our relationship's not crazy. This is just normal gender differences and normal things that, you were raised by a completely different set of parents with a completely different set of values and traditions and ways of doing things.
Rules. Yeah.
Right. And once you can understand that and you can accept that, you can kind of move on and grow your relationship.
Mm-hmm. So the last thing we wanted to talk about was self-development when preparing for marriage. Maybe you're starting to think about marriage and you're starting to wonder, what can I do to lay the best foundation for a future relationship? And we feel that self-development is probably the number one thing you need to do and should work on leading up to a marriage. When you are single and you don't have other people in your life to worry about, that's when you truly have the time to really look inward and assess what characteristics about yourself are good, what are things that would be best corrected, and how can you grow into the best possible version of yourself.
I remember when I was preparing for marriage, I really wanted to create a life of true freedom. I wanted to have the freedom to love who I was as a person and what I stood for. I also wanted the freedom to love my future wife unabashedly and wholeheartedly. I wanted freedom from a life of regrets, freedom from addiction and vices, and the freedom to truly experience, with full integrity with myself, an authentically amazing experience with my future spouse. And to do that, I felt like I really need to gain mastery, over my mind, over my body. And, I had really bad habits growing up. I was into video games. I started viewing adult images and just got into these bad habits. And it took me a while to break free from it, but eventually I did. And, it took a lot of, again, mind over body control. And the most impactful habits for me and developing myself, thinking about my future spouse and preparing myself for that was, I started to begin to run twice a week, so replacing a lot of that video game time with that, listening to audiobooks and podcasts, so all these productive things, and, just shifting my mindset to willingly welcome change and try to become the best person I could be. I started this habit of rising early in the morning, and just all these things kind of helped contribute to become who I wanted to be and become a person of integrity that I could then, grow with my future spouse to become what I wanted.
Yeah, I think that's very powerful. Just that awareness to reflect on yourself and really challenge yourself to become your best possible.
Right. You don't want to go into a marriage thinking that this other person has to fix me. That's not fair to the other person.
Right.
And you want to start off with as strong a foundation as you really can.
Marriage will bring enough challenges. You don't need personal vices and bad habits to further complicate things.
Right. And we want to kind of go into so maybe you're a little further along and you're thinking, about somebody. You want to make sure that you address your deal breakers. What core values, core tenets do you have that you need to share with your spouse? I feel like, right from the get-go, like the first night we really met up to think about, hey, do we want to enter into a relationship? We addressed those core values. We talked about things like, are you okay with tattoos? Are you okay with drinking? Are you okay with all these kind of deal breakers that we had? And sharing, the whole honest truth about ourselves with each other. Being
honest with yourself, too, even if you have a crush on someone, you do have to look at it very objectively and say, is this person really a good fit? Because I have these values that are near and dear to my soul, and I live by them and abide by them, and I have to know that the person I'm marrying can respect those things. So it's critically important to know who you are, what you stand for,
what your own life goals are, your own life purpose, and will this person jive with that, know, and can you grow together to that life goal, to that life purpose.
Right.
And it's not just about the person too. You also have to consider their family. Their family has so much input into.
Right. You're not marrying someone in isolation, and they come from a family that raised them in a certain way with a certain set amount of beliefs and unspoken rules and outlooks on life, and the more you know about their family, the better you can understand your partner. And if you have trouble with the family, you might have trouble with your partner. So you've got to really think about that, because this is who they value, this is where they came from, and you have to be able to respect that. So important to look at the whole picture, not just a person in isolation.
Right. And I know a lot of people are busy, but again, this self-development is so important. And one thing that I learned today, actually, that I thought was really critical was, instead of saying, I don't have time to do this, you can rephrase it and say, it's not a priority for me to do this. I don't have time to read. It's not a priority for me to read. And when you rephrase it, it kind of changes in your mind to think, oh, is it really not a priority, or is this something I truly want that I can make into a priority? So instead of saying you don't have time for things, say it's not a priority for me to do that, and see if that changes something in your mind.
It empowers you. It shifts it from a victim mode of, oh, well, circumstance doesn't allow me to, oh, well, actually, I just aren't giving it a proper priority in my life. Or
you're being intentional about that decision, taking ownership over it.
That's a good one. Right. So we hope you enjoyed this episode and could find some inspiration from it. Just to recap, we discussed our story. We shared a little bit of advice and input from our relationship, and we laid out 3 key principles to create a thriving marriage. And those were to unite with the greatest common denominator in your relationship, be on the same team, and never take each other for granted. If you can do those 3 things, your marriage is going to be a lot more firm and fulfilling for the both of you.
Right. So thanks for listening, guys. Thanks for making this a great show. And don't forget, if you would like to leave us feedback, please call that number. Again, that's 862-200-7484. And leave us an iTunes rating and review. We really appreciate it. So we hope you gained something from this episode and can't wait to see you next time. Thanks. Godspeed.